Hello, and welcome back to Petty Daydreams for episode 4. So guys, first of all, every week you continuously surprise me and make me feel so grateful for your support. I have had over 220 listens, downloads on my podcast as of Monday this week. I put out a little call to action that if you hadn't listened, I was one away from being 200. And then you guys went and blew that out of the water. So I'm really thankful. It's been really exciting. I couldn't do this without you. I love hearing your feedback, starting these conversations with you. I'm super proud of the meme I made and used to get out the word that I needed one more download to hit 200. SpongeBob forever for all my millennial friends. It's been so exciting covering all this ground with you and hearing your feedback. I had my first review, which was super nice. And then I had a few friends share their thoughts about the podcast on their feed, on Facebook, etc. So I definitely see you, and it makes my heart expand like 3 times, like the Grinch, whenever somebody, tells me that they enjoy listening to me. Obviously, this weekend is 4th of July. I usually release the podcast on Friday night and then it comes out on Saturday. So if you're listening to this as part of your 4th of July celebrations at home, hopefully safely, or maybe camping somewhere remotely, thanks for listening. Thanks for making me part of your weekend. Adding to this whole gamut of interesting things to talk about, I'm going to be adding some really exciting guests to the schedule. I have my very first one today. And of course, it's my best friend, Tonya. But guys, just because she's my best friend, that's not the whole reason I'm having her on here. Tonya has strong opinions about stuff. She has a lot to say, and she has a very unique experience that I know you're going to love to hear about. The whole thing is to build community. So if you guys know of somebody you think would be great to have on the show, send me an email. Put me in touch with them. So that brings us to today. I am having Tonya on to talk about her experience of moving from Oklahoma, moving to California, battling imposter syndrome, and kind of growing into this person that, she loves, she adores, and that she respects. So it's all about Tonya, and it's all about also this idea of anybody can kind of seize this adventure and seize their self-worth and value and communicate those applicable values into their life, into their actions. So it's going to be really exciting. I hope you guys really get something out of listening to Tonya and I talk about this. To give you a little bit of information about Tonya, besides being my best friend. So she currently works for a very big tech company as a recruitment analyst near San Francisco. She lives in San Francisco and lives in this super cool historic home that actually survived the earthquake of 1906. So in just a moment, I will get her on the line. And then this will definitely be a good episode for you if you have ever heard of imposter syndrome. And if you haven't, if you've ever had any doubts about your abilities, or if you've ever felt out of place in an environment where you worked your way up the line, you earned the promotion, you did all this and that, and you still feel like you don't quite belong, we're going to get into that. So just give me a second and I'll get Tonya on here. Hey everyone. So today I have Tonya Kiper on as my first guest ever for Petty Daydreams. So Tonya, I want you to tell me a little bit about yourself, tell my listeners about you if they don't know you already, and then tell me how you feel being my first ever guest for this podcast.
Thank you, Bobbie. Hi, y'all. I am Tonya Kiper, and I am Bobbie's best friend, and I am thrilled to be the first guest, and I'm glad I'm the obvious choice to be the first guest on Petty Daydreams. Obviously, I'm a very great, faithful listener for this podcast. So Just a little about me. I currently live in San Francisco. I work for Cornerstone RPO at Google as a recruitment analyst. And I previously was a mascot at the professional and collegiate level. I have Taco Tuesday every week. This week will be my 166th Taco Tuesday consecutive. Yes, that's over 3 years. And with that information, I feel like you know enough about me.
Lots of varying interests. I think maybe the taco thing is my favorite thing to tell other people about you, just because it's like that's commitment, okay? A taco every single Tuesday, every week. Like I would never get tired of eating tacos, and I know you don't either, but like how could you ever forget that fact about somebody?
I hope they never do. I mean, it's really fun and definitely like it's a cheap meal. Like you can have tacos really cheap. You can also have nice tacos. You can find them just about anywhere, and it kind of just keeps some fun in my life, especially during shelter in place during COVID-19, as well as just changing jobs and moving across the country. It kept some fun in my life.
I'm in Oklahoma and you're out in San Francisco, California. So tell me how COVID-19 and the response and everything has been for you personally.
Right. So for me, I work at a tech company. I work at Google for Cornerstone RPO, and they had a pretty quick response, like as a company, to have us work from home. Of course, most of our roles and most of the roles, because I do work within recruitment, can be taken care of at home. And so, you have a laptop, you have an internet connection, and I can do just about anything I was doing at the office anyways. And so that was a pretty quick transition. The state as a whole did implement a shelter in place back in March, and the city of San Francisco and like the entire Bay Area has been moving through shelter in place, and we're starting to move out of it at this time at the end of June. But they have paused it as numbers have went up even here. People are really good about wearing masks as far as in public, as far as I can see with my neighbors, and businesses that are open, like they don't allow you to come in unless you're wearing a mask, and that's a city requirement. Only eating outside. They've had a lot of rules, but people seem pretty okay with them. I would say one of the main reasons here people are taking it very seriously is because majority of people either personally use public transportation to get to and from work, or to and from the doctor's office, or to and from wherever they're exercising. And if they don't personally, like someone that they work with does. So when you're exposed to that many people and that many surfaces, and you can't necessarily account for all of them, you have to be extra careful and try to take note of where you are and who's around you. We're actually for sure going to be here through the end of the year, as far as like my company and like work wise. We're going to be working from home through the end of the year. For my team, as much as I would like to hang out with everyone, I think it is the safer choice. And I personally really like not having to commute so far. So it's not too bad.
Yeah. So how long is your average commute? Because like lay the groundwork for somebody who has no idea. Like you're out in Oklahoma, you drive your car to work every day. What is your commute like?
Oh yeah. Okay. So my commute is pretty rough right now, but I basically live a mile and a half from the Google bus stop that I take. And so it takes me anywhere between I would say typically 25 minutes on the public bus here, the Muni, to get to that bus, to get to the stop to where I get on the Google bus, and then I get to work. That bus is also in traffic, and so if I take the normal one, I will leave my house at about 6:55. I have to leave before 7. I pick up a bus about 2 blocks away at 7:05ish. And then at 7, it was 7:27 was the timing. But at 7:27, I get on the Google bus to get down to work, and I normally got there at about 8:45 or so, so it would be about 2 hours there, and a lot of times I would honestly push staying to work later so that I could get on so the bus back was shorter and wasn't sitting in traffic. So I'd spend normally between like 3 and 4 hours of my day getting there and back. Just kind of awful.
Yeah.
I haven't done it in so long now. I'm like, oh, man. In lots of
So
ways.
let's paint a picture for listeners who may not have ever met you. Tell me about your life. Well, basically, tell me what you got your degree in. Tell me about your life post college, like your early post grad years, reconnecting with me, and then me moving in, which kind of brings us up to a slightly present timeline.
Yeah. Okay. So I have a degree in human relations from the University of Oklahoma, and I graduated in 2013. In the beginning of 2014, I started working a political campaign. And so over 2014, I worked 3 political campaigns for 3 women and learned a ton. Enjoyed a lot of the energy and the excitement of politics when it was like it's very, very excited about it instead of frustrated with it necessarily at that point. Then in 2015, after the elections, I started working for the state of Oklahoma in the House of Representatives for Oklahoma as a legislative assistant. And I worked as a legislative assistant for 2.5 years. And during that time, so in the fall of 2016, I actually reconnected with you because we knew each other from our sorority. But you had posted on Facebook looking for someone to watch Juno, your dog. And I like commented and I was like, absolutely, let me help. And so I watched Juno in like fall of 2016 and then a few other times. And then in January of 2017, I had a roommate moving out. You were having your roommates at the house you were at were like splitting up. And so it totally just serendipitously worked out for you to be able to move in into like the second room and where I was living. And then we lived there till I moved out here later that year.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and quickly discovered that we were definitely best friendship material.
Yes.
Best
Oh my
friend
gosh. Yes.
material. Something like really like we had a lot of good times, honestly. Like Oklahoma City is not the same without you, but
No.
something really remarkable happened. You know, during that time, I remember you were just kind of in like this like transition phase where you kind of felt like you were outgrowing where you were, you know, your position. You were like always definitely thankful and like really got along with everybody, but you felt like you weren't really like meeting or exceeding your potential. You felt kind of stuck. Then you came across this program called Mission U and you decided to apply. So, explain a little bit about that. Like your early fears, what you thought of the program, and then what the program ultimately was.
Yeah, like you said, I was kind of looking around, and anyone who works in a government role, especially if it's like not someone who gets to for sure make the decisions of yes or no or change things, it is very cyclical where you look around and it's like you have very similar problems coming up and coming up again. And you know that there's ways to fix it, but there's just literally political reasons for them not to be fixed. And it's frustrating because you you don't get in that job. You get in that job because you want help. And so I was looking around and I was like, we should be able to help and to do better here. I was kind of looking at like, oh, maybe I should go back to school. In the fall of 2016, I had actually went back and taken an extra class at OU because I was thinking like, oh, maybe I'll get my master's in human resource management because I love people. I found this program called Mission U, and the concept of it was a 1-year college alternative that would provide you skills to become a data analyst. And the theories behind it were, as a college alternative, is basically like we kind of treat the bachelor's degree as this one size fits all thing that will give you like the validation to get a job. And like I had a bachelor's degree, however, I didn't really have that many skills, so like technical skills to bring to a table to like make a difference for a company. And those skills are not necessarily learned or earned during a bachelor's degree. And so it's like competency should be more important than the credentials of a bachelor's degree is the concept behind it. I applied on the very last day. It was on a Friday night. You and I were actually getting ready to go out. And I'd said something and I was like, I don't know, I'm thinking about it. And you're like, you should apply. And I was like, it seems like a really cool program. Like it's 1 year, like in San Francisco. And like, then it'll be like, I'll get to learn a bunch of stuff and then I can move back. And I was like, oh, I'll just apply, whatever. And I got an interview like really quickly, which their first interview was more based off of like just some basic answers. They had some math problems and things, like looked at how you thought through stuff. And so I did like a group interview and then I did a second interview and they like emailed me during the before the second interview and it was kind of just like, hey, just to prep you for this, like as we're wrapping up, we have like our acceptance rate's really low, like here's some good ways for you to prepare for your interview and you have to like write a like 100-word essay, I believe, and it was to say like talk about like what you thought like mission you would do to your life and like what you thought would change. And so I did that. I went through the interview and then actually 3 years ago today, on the day we're recording this, I got a call from Mike Adams and he was one of the founders of Mission U and they accepted me into the program. It was, 0.5% that were accepted into the program. So I was just like, oh my gosh, like this is crazy. Getting ready for it, I told my parents like after I like got in and basically my dad was like, I Googled this and I didn't find anything about it because it was brand new. Like Mission U, it was its very first year. So if you Googled Mission U, you would find something, I think it was about like Methodist Women's Group. And my dad was like, I think this is a scam. And then like, I had a couple of friends who were like, well, did you see this thing about like, yeah, you don't have to pay for this first year, but afterwards, like if you're making over $50,000, you pay 15% of your income for 3 years, which that was their strategy for payment. And there was still a cap on it. And I had seen that. I mean, it's better than a bachelor's degree where you pay $10,000 per year and are not guaranteed any sort of return on investment. I had kind of a bunch of people doubting that it was even a real thing. It felt right. And I was looking around and I knew that if I didn't go, I didn't move and didn't try, I would wonder like what would have happened. And I would have wondered what I would have learned and who I would have met and, what things I could do and places I could be. And I'm so glad I have such bad FOMO that I got myself out here. And I guess, I was kind of even thinking about this as I was preparing for us to talk. And I know we're going to be talking about imposter syndrome, and so I want to go ahead and like talk a little bit about it. When I was coming out here, I drove myself, and I told people I was moving, but I was slow to tell people because I was waiting for like a few weeks for them to call me and be like, actually, Tonya, we picked the wrong person. We select the wrong one. Like we got your scores mixed up with someone else's scores. We got the notes from your interview mixed up with someone else. And we're sorry. Like, we can only accept 25 people. And so I'm really sorry we messed up. I was literally trying to justify a way out of the way, like I didn't get in. I was like, okay, like, and if like they're going to call me. And so my phone would ring and I'd freak out. I'd be like, here it is. They're going to tell me I didn't get it because like, surely like I'm not that great to get, to get into like this program that only 0.5% were admitted. There were 5,000 applicants. Why would I be one of them that got in? And one that never happened. And
it'd be pretty obvious.
Yeah, I mean, that didn't happen. So I was like, okay. Like, and I think, It was crazy because I swear, even when I was riding up here, like I took like the public transportation to come up into the city because I was terrified of the thought of driving up here. I like literally as I was driving up, I was trying to like disaster plan. I was like, what happens if they tell me they didn't mean to let me in? Like, I was like, I will. And I was like, I'll come back over here. There was like a restaurant across the street from the Spotify offices, which is where our first day was. I was like, I'll come back over here. I'll eat. I will. And I was like, I can't call my parents immediately or tell people this immediately. That would be so shameful and embarrassing. And so I was like, I was disaster. Like, I had already like completed 4 weeks of like pre-work. I had already like online met all these people, and I was still convinced that they had made a mistake. And like I had tricked them somehow to like letting me in, which was bizarre. Luckily, like they didn't. It wasn't a mistake, but I gotta be real. Even after I figured out that it wasn't a mistake on their part and it wasn't an accident, it wasn't an error, I feel like I still kept looking around and being like, oh no, like I'm not picking up this information as quickly. Maybe they didn't make an accident. Maybe it wasn't an error on their part, but like maybe they read me wrong. Maybe I don't know how to do this. And I assumed like everyone else must be excelling. But we weren't talking about them. Like this was the first week. And it was just like, okay, like take a step back, ask how other people feel. Like don't be ashamed of not understanding something the very first time you see it. And like I was okay, but it's kind of crazy to think like all of these signals were happening that were saying like no, you were chosen, like no, you're doing well, like things are lining up for you to be able to be here. And I was still looking around for reasons to why, like it was just luck that I happened to be there.
Between the time when you first got there and
Uh-huh.
then when you started having those conversations, was it like a comparison thing, like where you saw these other people and you're like, oh my God, like they're so much more accomplished than me, all this stuff, where you were like comparing yourself and then somehow finding yourself falling short?
At times, it was that, but also I'm like, what was I comparing to? I think like part of me was comparing to some of their Facebook or their Instagram photos where they're like having this fun time even. But as far as like on the like, can I do the schoolwork? Can I do the educational work needed for this program? It was it was me comparing, but me comparing to something I didn't know. It wasn't like they were
Yeah.
publishing all of our grades and like so then you would see where you were. Um which I totally like understand like that being used in different things, but that wasn't happening. I was just assuming. I was looking around and I was like, "Oh my gosh, everyone else must be doing so much better than I am. They must be getting this." Like, they posted this photo on Instagram with them like having beers with friends, like, and I'm still sitting here at 9 p.m. working on this. And come to find out, like, that wasn't necessarily true, but my brain was telling me, like, oh, you're like, this isn't coming instantly easy. So, like everyone else it is. And, like, that's not
You had no idea.
honest. I'm like trying to compare that. And I was like, okay, don't be weird. Stop.
So what was the coursework like? Just like a short
Ooh.
summary, like what was it like every day?
Yeah, every day. So we did Zoom classes back before it was cool. So back in the fall of 2017, it was Zoom classes. Every 2 weeks, there were topics we'd go over, like marketing, statistics. We worked on Excel, Python, SQL, and we had different classes throughout the day. You would have homework assignments that were due the next day, but it was basically 8:30 to about 3 o'clock every day, Monday through Friday of classwork. So
And
we were all in Zoom.
you had never done any of this before.
Oh no, I mean I had taken like statistics classes, but I was like not that great on Excel. Like I was okay, but I wasn't good on Excel. Yeah, I definitely had not taken any video Zoom style classes, which is a different style of learning. You have to decide to be focused on it because it's really easy to scroll from tab to tab when everyone just staring at their computer.
Yeah. So, I mean, you were thrust into an entirely new situation, and yet you were still finding yourself comparing your experience to an experience that was just like made up in your mind.
Yep.
And you were letting that impact your education too.
Yep. And how I felt about myself, the story I would tell myself about how I was doing. And I knew my family, and originally my plan was to move back. And so it felt like I was even kind of looking for excuses for, like, if I quote unquote had to move back home, how, like, one, that would be okay. And how actually that was what I really wanted, even though it wasn't. I knew it wasn't. It was like the unknown was worse than what the known was, because whenever I became closer with people in the program, I realized, oh, other people are also struggling on this. But the unknown of me, it was like, oh, well, if I don't ask, I can just assume, because I'm scared if I ask, it's going to confirm what I think I know. It was like, oh, what happens if it confirms that I can't, like, excuse it out? Like, which is dumb.
So, do you think that was when you first noticed something was wrong?
Yeah. I was living with my friend's mom in the south part of the Bay Area, and not everyone else, but in my mind, every single other person was living with other people in the program. There were a few houses where people were living together, but there were also several of us who were not living in those houses. So I felt separated, and I felt like, oh no, they're not including me. But actually, every time I was up in the city for class or just for fun, I can't think of a single time that I was like, I was not invited to do something. I was not, like, invited to hang out with these people. And so it just became like this sort of like this thing in the corner that, like, I don't really know about, and it's just confusing, and it's like, but I don't want to get close enough to it to, like, confirm or deny what I think I know. Yeah, I'm like, wow. That's what and really, like, being out here is the first time I'd heard people talk about imposter syndrome, and to call it by a name. I did not know it had a name. I didn't know it was a thing. I just thought there was something wrong with me. But if you don't have a name for something, it's just like, where do you go? Like, if you don't have a name for like a sickness, or like when we didn't have a name for, like, COVID-19, and we're just like, oh, it's a bad flu. Oh, it's a bad flu. Oh, it's a bad flu. And then it's like, well, can you work on it and make it better if you don't understand what it is?
A
Yeah.
lot of times in mental health, people that are more outspoken about it and stuff, they say that there's power in the diagnosis. Because I think when you don't have a name for something, and so imposter syndrome isn't something that's in the DSM-V, and it's more like a pattern of behavior than anything else. But when you don't have a name for something, you feel like you're the only one experiencing it. And in that is like some inherent shame and fear. So I think that when you started hearing about it, it maybe just like opened up your mind that you're like, oh, this is something that other people experience too.
Absolutely.
And I think you'd been avoiding that a little bit too.
Oh God, yeah. Of course I was avoiding it. I was like, ew. I mean, it was like, oh, it's, if I don't know it, I can't confirm it. It's almost like when you are sort of being broken up with from someone you're just talking to, and you're like, I'm just not gonna say anything, and maybe things will be fine, because if I confirm it, I'm gonna be really hurt. Like, it's like, you're like, oh, I'm just
Basically.
gonna not know. Like, that's basically what you're doing with yourself. And I have had an ADHD diagnosis for a while, and I avoided for a long time getting any treatment. And it was like, well, if I don't technically have a diagnosis or anything, like, then I can just pretend like it's not really a problem. Like, I'm just like, I just have problems. Like, I was like, what excuses can I get around to make me try to pretend like I have less shame about it? And it's like, okay, no, it's okay to need help.
Yeah. And I mean, it's kind of liberating too when you finally acknowledge the fact that something is happening. I mean, everybody, I think, kind of avoids confronting those situations. I know I do. To have something like imposter syndrome, which is kind of like an isolating behavior anyway, I just think it's so profound. I mean, it seemed like to me when you moved to San Francisco, it was the beginning of like an adventure in your career, but it was also like this beginning of a huge emotional adventure where you got to know yourself better. You became more aware of yourself. You started to, just discover, I guess, different methods of thought and stuff, which kind of opened you up to exploring yourself more.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely correct. Actually, like, I admitted to one of my coworkers at the beginning of coronavirus. She was just like, "Oh, how's it going? Like, how are things like with work?" And I was like, "They're okay. I'm feeling a lot of imposter syndrome because now I don't know how to quote unquote prove that I'm working, even though like no one was asking for me to prove that. Like I was doing work." And she was like, "Yeah, we all feel it." And just, it's a thing that people talk about. So it's like not a dirty word. And, it's not bad to say, "Hey, like I have, or like this is how I feel, or this is what I'm thinking." And I think you're so right. Completely changing up my environment, both like physically and like location wise, where like my comforts or what I'm used to are not just around me, made me, kind of reconsider like what I want in my life, what I don't want in my life, made me like have to be more proactive towards deciding what I wanted my daily habits to look like. And actually, like now I have two different journals that I write on every single morning. And one of them is like I set goals that are like about 10-year goals, and a couple that are a little further out, and then that I write every single day. And then this other journal is kind of talking more on a granular level. And like these things existed before I moved out here, but I wasn't even open to the possibility of like dreaming and thinking so large of my life that I would even consider like setting goals that like I write down every single day now.
It's just radically different than how you were,
Yeah.
3 years ago.
It's crazy. I'll read you a couple of my goals that I like write down every day, and trying to just think back to what 3 years ago I would have said no, like I don't believe this, but I'll read three. So one is, I am a chief people officer of a Fortune 100 company. So I think that role will be very impactful, not only for that company and for people who work there, but I think at that level, I will be able to impact an entire industry. And so that's something that, of course, like that's been in my heart, but like I'm not scared to say that that's what I want. It's not shameful to make a claim to what I want. And I think for a long time, I have found a lot of value in myself for being like just humble and thankful for what I have, to a point that I'm not asking for more. And so I think that's definitely been a change. And another thing I write every single day is I have $75,000 in the bank and $250,000 in my paycheck each year. And it's kind of crazy because money is a weird thing, of course. People are weird to talk about it, but I actually fully believe that I bring enough value that is reasonable. And I'm not saying that that's happening tomorrow, but to me, it was the thought of even making $50,000 when I moved out here was wild. Like that was wild to me. I was like, yeah, sure, Mission You. If you get me a job where I'm making $50,000 a year, like I'll pay 15%, whatever. But now I'm like, okay, yeah, of course I'll make $50,000 a year. Why would I make less? And yes, it's a different cost of living than Oklahoma out here. But yeah, if I moved back to Oklahoma, I can't see myself taking a job making under $50,000. I know I bring more value than that. So, you can work remotely for a lot of companies. So, hey. And then the other one that I write every day that is really important to me is I am a life-giving friend. I've always had lots of acquaintances and a lot of people in my life. And sometimes I write that off as like, oh, I'm just like a nice, happy person. But no. I'm intentional. I care about people and I love them. And I think it's like I write those every single morning before I do anything. So, as I'm writing them in the morning, I'll be like, oh, how yesterday was I a life-giving friend? How yesterday did I make steps forward towards becoming a chief people officer of a Fortune 100 company? And if I don't write those down and I don't think about those things, I don't know if I would accomplish them. Moving out here where feels like people are not as afraid to fail and people are not as scared of big dreams, it's definitely changed the way I think about things, the way I tackle problems. I don't just look at a problem and be like, oh, that's too bad. I look at a problem and I say, I wonder how we could make it better. Is there some sort of technology we could develop? Is there some sort of training that could make this better? Is there something that you could do with education? In a way, it even makes me just feel more like in control of my life and more like I have the ability to change the things that are not good. Like, that's nice. It's nice to be able to look at things that are not good and be like, I am going to change that and not just let that happen. So, yeah.
So you have a new authority over your life, really.
Absolutely. Even though, I still have the same hours a day. I sleep more than I ever have in my life now. I sleep 8 hours a night, which is wild. But yeah, I have authority over my life. I have authority over what words I put into the world. And that's nice.
Bringing it back to this idea of imposter syndrome, if you were to define it in one sentence, how would you define imposter syndrome?
I think I would define imposter syndrome as a way to make excuses for what you have earned. And both good and bad. I honestly don't really believe in luck. I do believe in serendipity, but I'm not lucky that I got here. I'm not lucky to have the role I have.
Real quick, I'm going to read you. So, like I said before, it's not in the DSM-V, so it's not like depression or anxiety or something like that. But I'm going to read you, and this is from Psychology Today, a basic definition of imposter syndrome. And then I want you to tell me if you think that's a good technical explanation. So, the imposter syndrome is a psychological term referring to a pattern of behavior where people doubt their accomplishments and have a persistent, often internalized fear of being exposed as a fraud. And then it's saying that they have found that despite having adequate external evidence of accomplishments, people with imposter syndrome remained convinced that they don't deserve the success that they have. They call their success luck or good timing and dismiss it as others believing they were better and more intelligent and more competent than they actually are. And so it also says that it actually affects men and women in equal numbers. And I found contradictory research that said more men are affected and then other research that said more women are affected. Do you think that's a pretty good technical generalization of kind of how it feels?
I do believe so. I feel like for me and from people that I have talked to about imposter syndrome and the fear of being found out, it's crazy to say that now. I mean, I was a mascot. I was a literal mascot, and I was more afraid of being found out that that I tricked them into letting me into Mission U than I was of people or kids discovering that, a horse was that was standing and hugging them was a human. So
So, so what do you think has been your biggest accomplishment regarding imposter syndrome?
mm. Ooh, it was last May, or maybe last June, I actually asked for a change in title at my role at a company. I was terrified of asking, and I was actually like denied it after a few days, which is fine because I then decided to look for other jobs, which not out of anger or spite, but I was like, I had decided that I had earned that. And I
And you knew
didn't.
your value.
Yeah, I was like, I was asking for a change in title. I was not asking for a change in salary. And I know, right? But I think making a choice to have that difficult conversation was probably the biggest move for me. And also with that, it had me like I continued. I didn't just say, "Oh, okay, fine, I'll just sit back down." Like, well, I did say, "Oh, okay, thank you. Like, thanks for considering." And then I said, "Okay, well, I'm gonna actually start looking at moving to a different job that has a bit of a different role."
What do you think has been your biggest accomplishment since leaving Oklahoma?
Hmm.
This could be anything.
Yeah. Hmm.
I mean, you kind of got a bit, this is, you kind of have somebody's dream job out there.
I definitely kind of do. I really enjoy my job and my team. At the end of Mission U, I did not have a role. I didn't have a job immediately. I was actually working as a professional mascot part-time here, which you know all about, but I didn't have a role out here, and it took me a few months. And during that time, I was living in the Bay Area, which is so expensive, and rent is expensive, food is expensive, insurance is expensive. I didn't settle for a job that I wasn't interested in, and I did not start chasing other jobs or other roles. And I did not make the choice to move back home where it would have been easier to find a job and find security. I think that was making the choice to stay when it would have been easy and my family would have welcomed me back home. That was my biggest accomplishment. It was a hard few months, but I am so thankful that I dug in and I stayed and I made it happen.
So, would you say that you're happy that everything has worked out the way it has so far?
Yes.
Even though you've had bad days, I mean, everybody has difficulties. And like you just described, I mean, you had a moment of doubt. Are you happy you stayed? Are you happy that you decided to apply and move across the country?
Yes, I am so glad. And, I had my heart broken out here, and that was another time where it was right when I was actually still searching for a role. And even still, I'm so thankful that I'm so happy that I came out here. I'm so happy that that one random night in early June 3 years ago, you're like, yeah, go ahead and apply. And I'm so glad that the FOMO in me got me to too excited about this program that I just couldn't miss it whenever I did get accepted.
You
It is
persevered.
not easy, but it is so good. It is so good.
So I think that's about all the time we have. Obviously I'm always proud of you, and I'm I just love seeing your life unfold. Um so it's so funny talking about them from a perspective of like telling other people about them.
Lol.
Um but I guess to wrap it up, so if people want to connect with you, how do you suggest they get in touch with you?
Yeah, I would say the easiest way I am, you can watch my Taco Tuesday adventures on like Instagram. It's going to be OU Tonya with an O, so OUTONYA. and that would probably be a great way. Or feel free to send me an email at tonyakiper@gmail.com. I check those all the time. Now, don't send me spam email, though. I actually read all those. So, yeah.
And so yeah, I would highly suggest giving Tonya a follow. If not for how great she is as a personality and as a friend, definitely for the tacos. Every Tuesday, without fail, Tonya documents eating her taco so that everybody knows her streak continues. And what number is it? The actual number?
This is 166 weeks. I didn't share the photo a couple of Tuesdays ago whenever it was Blackout Tuesday because I was supporting the Black Lives Matters movement. I'm still supporting them. And I just was like, no one needs me, a white woman, sharing a silly taco. Like, I don't need that. So I shared it the next week. I know, I felt kind of bad. I was like thinking about it honestly for a long time. And then I was like,
it was the right move. Yeah. I mean, the whole point was not to have like people occupying that space, white people occupying that space for recognition of the movement. So I think that was probably a good call. But you still ate the taco, which is...
I still ate the taco. Still took a photo. I posted it the next week. It's in, like, if you want to watch a taco highlight, I have a taco highlight on there that's really long, but lots of good tacos.
Bad idea.
Yes.
Thanks again for being my first guest. I don't think I would want anybody else on as my first guest on this podcast.
So glad.
But I can't wait to see you soon. You're going to be out here for a wedding in a couple months. And obviously I'm going to see you, come out and visit you again. Hopefully COVID doesn't make that too long. But just thanks for being on here. Thanks for sharing with my listeners your experience. And I know they're going to appreciate it as much as I do.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for having me on here. And as you've even said in the advice section, the advice that you are giving to your listeners is literally what you would tell me. Like it's spot on, exactly what you would tell me, whether we were sitting on the couch or I'm on the phone. You say the exact thing that... None of it's surprising me, I got to be honest, because I'm like, oh, yep, that's Bobbie. So
that's the review you were waiting for to ask you for advice. There it is.
There you go.
Okay, thanks, Tonya. I'll talk to you later.
Perfect. Bye.
Bye. So I really hope you enjoyed that interview with Tonya. She's obviously like a huge inspiration in my own life. I hope you got something out of this whole discussion about imposter syndrome, about the ways that we try to limit ourselves, and the fact that really, if you have a dream, you need to go for it. And if you have an opportunity, you need to take it. If you ever want to get in contact with Tonya, she left her information, or you can send me a DM and I'll get you connected to her. She's always open to questions and stuff. She has a thriving LinkedIn. She's like LinkedIn queen. It was really exciting to have a guest on that had so much to say. And if you appreciated that interesting perspective, or you have somebody you think would offer another interesting perspective to the show, just message me like I said. Next, we're going to move on to the advice segment. And this is about a listener that's requesting advice on knowing how to toe the line between sharing out of a sense of liberation or a spirit of liberation and showing too much. So stick around for that. And we're back, guys. Thanks for sticking around. This is the advice segment of Petty Daydreams. As I've said before, and I'll continue to say, I give advice like you're my best friend sitting right across the table from me. As Tonya said, sometimes it doesn't look like that. Sometimes it's over the phone, over text message, whatever. But this is where I take the time, and I have a form that you can use. I take the time to read a request for advice, and I basically have them explain the problem in their own words, and then I offer advice on the air. So this form is available on my website. I have it linked on, I believe, Instagram. If you need to find it, just send me a message. It's always on my Facebook. I post it about once a week. But anything under the sun is an acceptable topic to request advice about. And so let me read you today, and I'll recap this. So they're trying to toe the line between finding a place where they can be liberated without sharing too much necessarily. So they're trying to figure out what level of expression is right for them. So let me read this to you. Lately, I've been inspired by sex mentors and other creatives on Instagram to start really embracing and loving my body. It's all been really good for me, and I've been falling in love with my whole being. One of the downfalls is that I want to share my self-love with others, but this could come across as sharing too much. The creatives I follow embrace non-sexual nudity in a society that sees nudity as purely sexual. I also want to embrace this, but feel conflicted knowing about the society we live in and how this could impact my future career as a healthcare provider. I just want to share realness the way these creatives have. I feel conflicted with sharing or not sharing. Okay, dear listener, as anybody who is intuitively creative, expressive, sensitive to the world, you know that there's this really hard to define line between being your authentic self out in the world, and then almost finding that there are consequences to being your whole self out in the public sphere. And it's not necessarily that these restrictions we have are a positive thing. You look at a society, like you said, a society that views nudity as inherently sexual, and look at the effects of that. People don't want to have breastfeeding women in public. We don't have hardly any topless beaches here in the US. Almost any kind of form of self-expression or intimacy or nudity is labeled as vulgar or repulsive or immoral. And to me, that's a big issue. You were inspired by these sex mentors and creatives that you found on Instagram, and they unlocked something inside of you. And I think that's profoundly impactful. I mean, they're making ripples in the world just by destigmatizing the female, the male, the human form, and taking away all the mystery and inherent sexualization that is rampant. So, in other societies, they don't view nudity in the same way that Americans view nudity. Even in Canada, you have differences. And a lot of this could also be tied to religion. But religion is found throughout the world, so you can't necessarily pin it on that. They unlocked this thing in you, and you feel the need to express yourself in the same way. I definitely think you should. But I think there's ways to go about it that won't put your career in jeopardy. Because being creatives, being these empathetic individuals that we are, not being locked into this idea that our body in its normal functioning state is inherently sexual or causes sexual arousal, we are still locked into the society that believes those things. And that's one of those things too. Women are on a whole less respected for doing stuff that men would do. I mean, you have teachers that lose their jobs because they had a modeling career at some point, which is totally backwards to me. Practical solutions? I mean, join like a nudist group or like a free living group or something like that. Honestly, these people are probably going to be they're going to have a lot of discretion. I wouldn't worry too much that they're going to like leak a photo of you or something, like participating in these rituals and living like that. Test out the waters by going to a nude beach or something. Find other people that are more like open to these ideas and then immerse yourself in that world. On the other hand, you can also do things like create a Finsta, or maybe you create a website, and maybe I don't really know what's going on with Tumblr now, but maybe you could make a art page or something like that. I definitely don't think you should be suppressing your willingness to showcase your body and to live this free life. You want to be real. You want to be authentic. Those are things that are highly admirable. As it is, you could potentially lose your job if you're sharing nudes that somebody could screenshot with your name on them or something like that. So I would just say, express yourself, find safe ways to express yourself, and don't let the expectations of society necessarily hold you back. We've got to learn to work within these confines and then gradually expand those confines. So it's like you're somebody on the inside almost. And that's the bad side about society. But I really encourage you to continue living this. Find ways to share yourself in this way. I really encourage you to do this. And if you ever encounter any issues, feel free to reach out to me. You can do it anonymously, messages, whatever. But definitely don't hold back. When you start to repress parts of yourself that need to be expressed, you're going to end up just unhappy and filled with anxiety. Listener, I really hope this was some good advice for you. Just know, if anything else, that somebody out here supports you. And I'm sure there's other people that will support you in this quest too. Anyway, as I said, reach out to me. If anybody else has something they would like to receive advice on, like I said, I have a form, you can send me a message, etc. I'm never going to share your identity. So next, we're going to move on to the hot take segment. And please stick around. I know this episode's a little bit longer than usual, but I hope this hot take will make it worthwhile for you. Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. I don't know. I'm going to keep trying new things with this segment. This is the hot take segment. I have a really juicy one for you this week. Like I've said before, hot takes is one of those things where I also receive submissions. So if you want to subtly subtweet somebody through this podcast that they will probably never listen to, go ahead, send me a screenshot and I'll read it on air if it's worthy of the hot take. But you can always do that by sending me an email to pettydaydreams@gmail.com, sending me an email, maybe tweeting me where I don't have Twitter. Any of those things. Maybe send me a letter if you can somehow find my address, and I really hope you can't. Anyway, this hot take today is especially ripe. As you guys may know, on July 7th, they're doing an economic blackout for Black Lives Matter. So somebody shared a picture of the flyer, and they said, "I will shop on July 7th while I am still a free American. I will not be told what I can and cannot do by a terrorist organization." Oh my gosh, guys. I think we're getting a little bit loose with what's labeled a terrorist organization or not. Did you know there are currently people who were at protests in Oklahoma City who have been labeled a terrorist? Their charges have been escalated to terrorism for being at the protest. And it's very interesting. And I think it's also hilarious that people think Antifa is like this organized thing. But that's the hot take I've got for you this weekend. Live and let live. Liberty is under attack in this country. I hope you're having a great 4th of July, eating hot dogs and not thinking about the demise of democracy. Anyway, like I've said before, this is the only political part of this podcast. Today I'm veering a little too much on the political side and not much on the humor side. Anyway, I hope you guys are having a great weekend. I hope you continue to have a great holiday weekend. 4th of July is one of my favorite holidays. As always, thanks for listening to this podcast. You really don't know how much I appreciate it, and I hope we can create this community and this dialogue to really advocate for other women and to learn from each other. A different perspective never hurts you. So with all that said, I'm going to go off and enjoy my weekend. Send me a message, share this episode if you like it, share a quote that you hated from it. Anyway, let's keep it positive, but give me that feedback. I love it. If you ever have any questions, I'm easy to contact. The music during this episode was from Evan Schaefer called Bright Side. Stay petty. Thanks for listening.